Congrats on getting beyond 1 million. What got you here won't always get you there. This is a podcast for entrepreneurs who want to reach beyond their 7-figure business and scale to 8, 9, and even 10 figures. I'm Brad Weimert, and as the founder of EasyPay Direct, I have had the privilege to work with more than 30,000 businesses, allowing me to see the data behind what some of the most successful companies on the planet are doing differently. Join me each week as I dig in with experts in sales, marketing, operations, technology, and wealth building. And you'll learn some of the specific tools, tactics, and strategies that are working today in those multi-million, 8, 9, and 10-figure businesses. Life can get exciting beyond 1 million. Man, this was a super fun episode to record. Today, I talked to Ramin Ettehad. He has a badass multi-8-figure company that serves the enterprise market. Here's the thing. He is a ninja sales operator, not only a great salesperson, but amazing at creating and running sales systems. If you're really good at sales in a company, it doesn't mean that you can sell ice to Eskimos. It means that you create a structure, a framework, a game that salespeople can play that is systematic. It is a predictable selling system. In this episode, Ramin breaks down not only some of the elements of that system, but the incentive structures that he uses to motivate salespeople and sales managers to get results. He also covers how they put their marketing on cruise control. So he's got some badass tools that they use, really platforms that they use to drive 50% of their volume, which comes from quote unquote demand generation. So leads that come in for the sales team to follow up to. In addition, we're going to dig into the tool that they built, which helps automate business processes. That sounds really complex. We get into that and simplify it a little bit. Dig into this one specifically if you're focused on sales, marketing, operations. Really, really tactical stuff comes out of this one. In addition, it was just really fun to record the episode. Hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoy recording it. Ramin Ettehad, it's fucking awesome to have you here, dude.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me over.
Definitely, I appreciate it.
So this is such a cool little office space here.
Yeah, thank you.
It's badass.
I appreciate that. Well, it's now purple, which is weird.
I like it.
But yeah, I feel like it fits in Austin. We've got some purple and some brass or bronze or whatever the fuck that is.
Yeah, these windows opening up to the art landscape of the city.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, we're gonna light it up. We're still early phases of this is Studio 2.0. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, we've had a lot of conversations about sales in different ways over the course of the last probably year or so.
Right.
And I wanted to have you on because you run an enterprise sales team and company. Yeah, I feel like you have to be dialed, but a lot of people do it poorly, and it sounds like you do it very well. So can you give me just a quick backdrop on what the company is, what you sell, and we'll dive into sales in a minute?
Absolutely. So the company is Oomnitza. We're a SaaS platform to manage all of your IT workflows, especially the ones that surround technology. So you imagine a technology object, whether we're talking about a laptop, a software as a service asset, a cloud resource. They enter a business, they move around the company, and then they ultimately leave the company in some form or fashion. So we help with the key workflows like onboarding, offboarding, security, provisioning, deprovisioning, refresh, and IT spend budgeting. And you kind of look at the life cycle of a technology asset, and there are tons of key business processes that run vertically against that horizontal landscape. And we've done a really good job of automating all those processes. It didn't start there, obviously.
Sure.
But we've built there over time.
When you say run vertically, what do you mean?
Well, you'll have, for example, let's take offboarding as an example. Mm-hmm. Tons of people, cringy subject, but tons of people being laid off right now.
Sure.
Making sure that you're deprovisioning access to core systems, getting laptops, mobile devices, endpoints, company-owned assets back.
Yep.
And doing it in an automated fashion such that it's not 30 tickets and tasks and a whole project just to get Brad's shit back.
Sure.
Is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So that's obviously towards the end of the technology lifecycle.
Yep.
But it's not just like a point in time email that goes out. The way the world's doing it today, or before, let's say, automated solutions, are just a set of tickets that say, hey, we need Brad to give back his stuff. And some IT goon has to go like chase it down and escalate to an HR manager and escalate to IT and then escalate to security. And then turns out Brad continues to have access to Salesforce for another 25 days and probably isn't a bad actor, but could be pulling down reports. Or still has access to an AWS console, which is way worse, right? It could really do some damage to the business. And you hear these horror stories all the time. So we want to go a mile wide and a mile deep on all of these use cases.
Got it. Yeah. So we've talked about this a few times because we've inside at EasyPay Direct, we played with different platforms that do some version of this, but they're limited. And when I say they're limited, so like basically what I heard was one use case at least. You hire a new person. They need access to a whole bunch of tools that you use internally. They need to get onboarded to your insurance, to your HR stuff, and then to all the other normal tools you use.
All their productivity tools. And everything else.
And then like some specialization based on their role, right? They might need more access to something or less.
Which team they're on, the administrative levels and so on. And you want to do that in a consumer-esque experience. So on the front end, when someone joins the company, obviously you want them to feel like I've just joined the best company ever and I'll never have to look for another job. I'll never work on my resume again. Part of that, at least, is that IT onboarding experience. You want it to be like Apple-esque, like, oh, I get to choose my laptop, here are the specs. And we want all of that to be done on like a front end consumer feel. Yeah. But then in the back end, it's just a bunch of bots that go action all of it automatically. You don't have some IT people running around and buying shit.
It's a fucking great pitch. Yeah, thank you. It is. I mean, it's like, I think often people don't think about operators of a business frequently don't think about their staff as customers, right, or clients, right. But the reality is, from the beginning of the job post all the way through onboarding and into training, is the initial reflection, of your company on them, right.
We actually try to indoctrinate and use consumer tech language into IT. So when we talk to IT, we're like, well, how do you train your end users? What's their adoption rate? And we're using like consumer tech lingo to have IT think about the employees they service with core services, with core technology services, as end users in a game they're playing. And I think that kind of, we're not the only ones, but I think IT is now indoctrinated and taken that on and really thinks about the consumer experience they're running internally. They're like brokers of services to all of the end users in a company. Yeah,
that's awesome. So from a product perspective or an ICP, like your ideal client profile, who is that and how in depth is the integration of the product? What's the price point?
Totally. It's changed a lot over time. And, it's kind of been an interesting flux of waves to get to where we are today.
Sure.
But today our core ICP is defined as a company between 2,000 and 15,000 employees. And the core kind of decision maker is generally the CIO chain of command. So CIO, CISO, VP of IT, director of IT. Depending on where you land and the type of project we start with, our average sales price is anywhere between 100 and 200K. Annual paid up front.
Awesome. Annual paid up front is awesome also.
That's where it's at. But I mean, we have a solution that you have to go implement. So you ask about the integrations. Today, as of whatever date it is, we have 150 different integrations to 150 different systems. And then each one of those systems, we touch almost every API endpoint they have, meaning that we probably have 2,000 points of integration across 150 systems. Not all of that is very hard to turn on. The whole thing is like, there's like a UI for it. You go and you attach to your core services, but you really do it's an implementation based software. You have to think through, all right, what is the best practice for employee onboarding? Do I want to give users choice on all of this stuff? Or do I want to give users choice on this shard of stuff and then everything else is just fixed already? So there's definitely an implementation view. And for that reason, we can't charge monthly.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. So one of the challenges first off, squarely enterprise, right? Minimum 2,000 employees. Yeah. And it makes sense because that's where the most pain is going to be from onboarding, offboarding, right? Monitoring all this shit. Like I know we have what we call a new hire checklist internally. And it's like, fucking 162 things or something. Right. And we do it manually.
Right. Right.
And some of it has gotten easier through this limited version of integrations through. So we use Gusto and we've looked at like Rippling, which is another platform, and they've got integrations to do some of the provisioning. But what we've found and what you see with integrations is people don't build the integration in its entirety, right? Right. They do like lowest common denominator integration, meaning it's like, okay, well, we can set up a new Gmail user for you, but we can't add them to groups. Right. Or something like that.
Yeah. It's basic provisioning, deprovisioning.
Yes.
Especially at the SMB SaaS level, because they're just trying to knock out as many potential integrations as possible.
Right.
We have to go way deeper. So I mean, not to get product geek, not to geek out on product.
I like it. Do it.
We end up like in a deprovisioning use case, for example, we'll do a whole user management best practice where we take back all their docs, reshare them with peers, take any existing work product and take it through like an escalation track to see who should own it next and where the work is complete. We'll remove recurring calendar invites. And we do this across like 130 different SaaS apps.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's talk about that. I want to get to the sales part of it.
We'll get there.
Which you already alluded to because it is selling the IT departments and selling the CIO with the language of employees being consumers is part of the sales pitch.
Yes, absolutely.
But
especially especially over the last handful of years, now it's kind of changing, right? I mean, that's a whole nother issue. But in the last handful of years in a zero interest rate environment, everything was about growth.
Right.
So onboarding was a really key use case. Now everything is about like efficiency. So we're talking a lot more about spend management, spend forecasting, obviously consolidation of services, because we can go scan everything and basically see how many apps you have that are redundant, where the utilization rate is below a certain threshold or above a certain threshold. And then you can make pretty strong economic decisions around new subscriptions or renewals and things like that. And obviously offboarding is huge right now. I mean, I hate to ambulance chase, but we're winning a lot of deals and growing a lot of accounts just based on the fact that there are so many mass layoffs happening.
Yeah. Well, look, I think there's a big difference with enterprise through a recession and SMB through a recession.
Right.
My general hypothesis has always been, or for a long time has been that if you're really big, you are a part of the macro. And when the macro changes, there's not much you can do except deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's where you see enterprise SaaS with huge layoffs. SMB, you're a needle in a haystack relative to the macro, right?
Totally.
You're a micro.
Yeah.
So you can outwork a recession.
Yeah.
You can change how you approach, like you just said, you can change your sales pitch.
Right.
Right. And now your sales pitch is totally different. You're focused on something else.
Right.
I love that. So I want to get back to that, but I want to talk product because you talk about the integration. So did you start this first off bootstrapped or funded? And did you start with enterprise or did you start with something else?
Yeah, great question. I think the vision of the company from day one was like really, really large enterprise. Like we wanted to be
awesome,
the new SAP. In fact, the whole founding team came from SAP, and we just wanted to build a company that was going to be like the next gen enterprise software company that would slowly beat the SAPs, Oracles, IBMs, Microsofts of the world.
Cool.
Big grand vision to start with, 20-year outlay. We're about halfway there on that trajectory. So trying to make that happen. What the reality on the street was when we first got started is, our first 10 subscription customers were between 300 and 700 employees. So still not SMB, but like lower middle market, you would call it. So we played for a number of years. We played really well in middle market. We built the right integrations that would service them. We took a technology first approach. I think just to make a larger point, as a startup selling solutions to other growth companies, to that lower middle market growth kind of segment, you have to have like product competency has to be your main thing. Like you can build a really cool sales, intelligence internally. You can have great marketing. All of that stuff matters. But if the product isn't excellent, it will not get adopted. And because we started the company in San Francisco, because it was that, 2014 to 2020 stretch of just crazy growth, and all the amazing companies that are now publicly listed today were just growth companies back then. The Dropbox, Uber, Yelp, Lyft, those were all of our customers initially. That was like our first couple cohorts of customers were these growth companies.
Interesting.
And what they leaned into were our workflows, our no-code capabilities, all of the integrations we were building. What they leaned away from was old, stodgy enterprise software. So they were willing to take a bet on an upstart, not necessarily because we had great marketing or great sales, but because the product at a core foundational level was much better than anything else in the market.
Funded?
Yeah. So we took a small friends and family round, like $250K. I would say from there, we kind of ran on that for quite some time until we hit like 25 lower middle market customers, raised a $2.3 million seed round, used that actually to grow all for a handful of years up until more recently, just before the pandemic, we raised through our Series B.
Got it. Can you share numbers on that, or revenue or headcount or something to give size and scope of where you are?
Yeah. Today, the company is about 120 employees. This year, we'll do like 30 million in subscription revenue. And the company is raised right around 30 million as well.
Awesome. Crazy. It's always interesting to me to listen to how people approach building product in particular, but building businesses when they're funded versus bootstrap.
Yeah.
So when you talk about super heavy focus on product and making sure that it's great, specifically when it's API laden, there are very few that I think successfully do that bootstrap. Like speed to market matters. And there seems to be this, in my head, there's this like comfort that comes with using somebody else's money to build a product that takes away some urgency for, oh shit, I need to turn $1 tomorrow.
Right.
You know, like I'm not paying rent if I don't make money tomorrow.
Totally.
And I think it buys some the luxury of being able to lean into great product creation. Right. Not to say that people always do it, but that's cool. So what was the first customer? How long did you go before you actually sold somebody? And did you have a functional product when you did that?
Yeah, great question. So we actually had the first handful of customers were not subscription customers. They were services accounts, services contracts. So we were doing this kind of notion that we were calling, that we learned from SAP, called co-innovation. So we would come to you as a business owner or as a line of business leader, like a CIO at a large company, and say, hey, Brad, we're a startup. We have a ton of development resources. We're really interested in building a product. The product categories that we care about are A, B, and C. We think those probably align to your kind of strategic imperatives for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years. In this world of this circle that we just talked about and your circle of shit that you care about, can we look at the overlap, pick a project, and we'll basically do it for you at cost. So we'll
Love
do it
that.
cheaper than you can buy it on the shelf, and faster and cheaper than your internal development teams can rejigger and add a new project to their already, overburdened list for the year.
Crazy.
And especially at that time, I don't know how the world's changed in the last, handful of years, but especially at that time, people ate that up. They were like, oh, absolutely. Here are like 3 projects that we want to do that we don't currently have internal resources for, and we don't feel like there's a great product to buy off the shelf. Or if there is, it's, $2 million from Microsoft, and it's going to take a year to implement, and we have to bring in Deloitte to do it, and blah, blah, blah. So we were able to get a handful of these projects, which gave us really, really great learning. And we kept seeing common requirements around this concept of asset management, enterprise asset management. You have an enterprise object. That object has a bunch of metadata that could be streaming in for a number of different places. And then that enterprise object goes through a workflow. So as an example, it could be a fridge in the back of a truck carrying Tyson chicken. And if the fridge's temperature goes above 35 degrees, that's red alert, kick off a workflow, set a notification, service or repair. It could be a shop floor, like a manufacturing shop that has a KUKA robotic arm that's doing nothing but painting the side of a car that's coming through that production line. If that robot goes down, that whole production line is down, probably for a day, 2 days, 3 days. If we could just figure out how to manage those assets and automate certain workflows to make that robot go up faster, your asset uptime is higher, therefore your production is higher, therefore your costs are lower, and so on. So we attach to use cases like that a lot. Initially.
Yeah.
The funny part of this is that we were doing it with these Bay Area companies where we were like, oh, this is great. Like one of our first customers was Tesla. One of our other initial customers was Flextronics. They're a contract manufacturer in the Bay Area. And we just thought that there were millions of companies like this. But turns out that there are 2 of the only manufacturers in the US. Like Tesla built a whole manufacturing plant in Fremont.
Right.
That's not usual in the US. Obviously, we ship so much stuff externally now.
Yeah.
So we were not finding repeatability there. But we had taken a lot of the core learnings and things we had built and kept the IP such that we built this abstracted asset management product. And then eventually, through a series of luck, actually, you wouldn't believe it, was a message on Twitter. This director of IT at a company called Gree, which was a Japanese mobile gaming company that had a second headquarters in San Francisco, hit us up over Twitter and was like, hey, I think I kind of get what you guys are doing, from some bullshit post we had made on Twitter, This is like 2013, 2014.
Sweet.
And we think we can use this for our internal IT use case. So we went and met them, since we were in San Francisco anyway. And they were like, yeah, we have a contract on the finish line with this, competitor of yours that we had never even heard of. Large company, ended up being a part of Sage
Sure.
Intact, like Megaco. And we were like, okay, what's the contract value? And it was like something really small, like 10K or 15K. We're like, if we match that and promise we'll do a better job, will you sign right here? And basically within 2 weeks, we had a deal done.
Crazy.
And that was our first subscription customer. They happened to be in this building called China Basin in SF, which is like a cool neighborhood on the water in SF next to the ballpark. And they were like, you should go upstairs and talk to the guys at Dropbox. We're like, upstairs, did you say floor 3 or floor 4? And like literally 2 weeks later, Dropbox was a customer and they introduced us to even another account. There, when you're first starting out, I don't know if you experienced too, but there are a few people that are just, you don't know why they lean in and help you so much. They're like this mix of early adopter and deal maker. They're able to make things happen. And we had a few customers that just leaned in and were like, you guys are awesome. Go meet, person A, person B, person C. And out of those 3, we closed 2 deals. And that's kind of how the ball got rolling.
Interesting. So I want to talk about referrals, and we'll have that be the segue to sales. But before I do, I want to outline the process that you went through. What'd you call it?
Co-innovation.
Co-innovation.
Yeah.
So this is the second time that I'm hearing some version of this in the last 2.5 weeks. So I was snowboarding with actually somebody that you should meet, Dan Martell, who was on the show a little while ago.
Cool.
Yeah, he's exited a few SaaS companies, and he runs a company called the SaaS Academy. And he does his like vacation every year is 48 of us go to this place called Baldface, which is middle of nowhere, British Columbia, to cat ski.
Cool.
Yeah, snowboarding for most of us.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But I meet a guy there, and he is from Boston Consulting Group, went off to do his own thing. And what he does is raises a fund and then approaches mega corporations and says, hey, I bet you have some problems. I bet we're equipped to solve the problems. Hire us on like a 3-year contract, and we will build an internal team you'll have part ownership of the team, and we'll create this sort of entrepreneur group. We'll hire in a CEO, build the company for you, and then sell it back to you.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's super interesting.
Yeah.
And the pitch to the CEO then at that point is basically, look, we have a staged exit for you already.
Yeah. Just come in, get this thing going.
It's a super sexy pitch. It's like CEO gets some equity, some to come in, a decent salary for a while. And look, we've got a 3-year runway to sell.
Yeah. And
we already have the company that's going to buy it.
Right. You'll make some money and it's like a double on your resume.
Totally.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it's the same concept, right?
Right?
It's like you're approaching a company that doesn't have the focus, even if they have the resources internally to do it, they don't have the focus and ability to shift the resources to solve the problem.
Right.
So they would rather co-innovate.
Exactly.
I love that, man. That was the first time I had heard it, and this is a different take on it, but the same idea.
Yeah. It really de-risks a lot of the process.
That's amazing. I think
if you're trying to start a mid-market or enterprise SaaS company, go talk to the line of business leaders. They have budget.
So cool. They have budget.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay, so let's talk about the initial pitch was the co-innovation. Let me see if I can solve the problem.
Yep.
And then the subscription was happenstance.
Yep.
And then you ended up with a referral partner or 2 or 3.
Yeah, just people that were really nice and they were like, yo, this is awesome.
Right.
And my friends upstairs would probably like this. And my buddy Richard over there would probably like this. You should take us to dinner. And, that was it. Yeah.
Sell us stuff.
Yeah.
That's contingent on having a good product.
You have to have a good product.
Right.
Yeah. And you have to be cool because so much of what they're betting on is like the early glimpses of the product and like, am I betting on this team? And that's kind of what's cool about SaaS and subscriptions in general. Like if I was selling you a car, you would look at the car and I'd be like, it has all these trinkets and bells and whistles. And then I'd say, but Brad, the next version is going to be so fucking cool because it's going to have these extra bells and whistles. And you'd be like, great, man, I'll just wait for the next version.
Right.
But when you're buying software, you're betting on the roadmap. You're betting on the development team. You can say, okay, here's what I get today. Here's where the product's going. Who's building it? Wow, these guys are badasses, or they effing suck, and you make your decision based on that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me think of the first Tesla I bought, and I bought it with full self-drive.
Yeah.
Betting on the fact that they would get their shit together and release it.
Yeah.
Like have a functional full self-driving.
Yeah.
Of course they didn't. So I spent an extra 10 grand or whatever on the first one.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so cool about Tesla though. Is like the over the air updates. Like now you're actually just buying software on wheels.
Yep. Except they make you buy enough hardware to accommodate the full self-drive. Right. So if you don't have the
Is that your Plaid outside? That thing's so badass.
It is, yeah.
I saw the way. I'm like, I'm sure that's Brad's car.
That's the second Tesla that I've had. And now it's like each one is so dope. But yes, being able to push through the air is like you just get new things. Right. And it's fucking cool. So I'm with you on the roadmap of the software. So what was the transition in sales? Because now when I've talked to you about sales, it's not like, hey, a couple guys referred you product. It's a systematic approach it's a predictable selling system. Totally. Right. So what's the framework that you use to sell now?
I mean, we use a challenger sales methodology, which is about going in and telling people that they have a big problem and they don't even know how big it is. And then eliciting all of these unknown knowns. And they're like, oh shit, this is really a big problem. And that will generally lead to some sort of proof of concept or trial, which will quickly spin into a contract. We do this, the motion is we do this through a little bit of marketing air cover. So we do nurture campaigns, education campaigns. We'll co-write stuff with people in the industry and we'll just kind of get the word out. Think of that as air cover. Doesn't do anything but maybe convert a lead form, right? Brad signs up and says, hey, this is interesting. I'm just doing this to download a PDF. But then we have SDR teams, sales development teams that spend all day looking at target accounts and lookalike accounts of those target accounts, building the personas, and then going after them over email, social, cold calling. So we're still blitzkrieging in that, we'll call it old style fashion. I know people love marketing over sales these days, but I fundamentally still believe in sales. Yeah. And we're looking for a certain conversion from activities to opportunities created. I mean, this is super basic, right? But I'm just going to cover it real quick. A certain conversion from activities to opportunities created. And then once opportunities are created, we bring in account executives. And generally, our account executives, our salespeople they're pretty damn smart. Like they had to have already been in the industry for at least 5 years, tons of closing experience, but also IT domain specificity and knowledge.
The industry meaning what?
SaaS, selling an IT solution for over 100K.
Got it.
Very specifically. Right?
It is very specific. Yeah.
So they're able to talk the talk, and they might not have sold this product before, but they've sold, adjacently innovative solutions that they know how to be a challenger and say, hey, what you're doing today isn't working. And here's why. And here's all the pain you're not even thinking about. And here's all the money you're leaving on the table. And here's all the security gaps that you look like an idiot when you talk to your InfoSec team. And here's why you don't get a seat at the business table with your VP of finance or your CFO, because you just look like a loss center. You're not looking like you're bringing any business value as an IT leader. So we try to rejigger and challenge their way of thinking such that they do get a seat at that business table. Anyway, so our AEs will take deals on and they will do everything from discovery to close. So they'll run the desk from the point of like, okay, hi, I'm a hand raiser and I'm semi-interested, all the way through to signatures. And with an enterprise motion, that can mean a lot of things. So you'll generally have a decision maker, but you have tons of stakeholders. Some of those stakeholders have something to lose from your product being brought in. Why? Because
they were responsible for doing it.
Yeah. Or they weren't responsible for doing it, or they were responsible for putting in the solution we might be replacing, or certain workflows we might be replacing, or a effed up project they tried to homegrown and build internally. Or maybe your point of value is that you have the keys on that homegrown tool and we're like, guys, this isn't going to scale anymore. You need a proper system to run this in. So there are people who have something to gain, people that have something to lose, people that are just trying to de-risk. So legal, procurement, and so on. So you have all these parallel tracks that you're running in the sales cycle outside of just get the core decision maker to believe this is a good idea and attach budget and timeline to it. You need that. You need budget and timeline associated to a decision maker with a project that he's willing to kick off. But you need to go get through legal. You need to go get through security, and you need to go get through procurement. And those things should happen in parallel. Otherwise, you get grin fucked. I can curse, right?
Yeah, you said F a few times, and I was like, "What is? Oh, fuck! He means fuck."
Yes. Okay. I was just making sure I didn't ask. Okay. So you can get grin fucked because your decision maker can be like, "This is the best thing since sliced bread, Ramin. Get in here. Let's make a project happen."
That's a great expression.
And then you're aligning your close date to, let's say, end of February, which is last day of February today, right? And then your decision maker is like, oh yeah, this is great. But now you got to go get in the legal queue and get in our InfoSec queue. And by the way, here's Jim from procurement, and he's a fucking asshole, and he's going to rip your quote down another 50%.
Yeah.
So we try to get ahead of all that stuff just as daily practice, line all of it up, set a close date, work backwards from that close date. And generally we have pretty high forecast accuracy as a result.
That's crazy. So, I want to highlight a couple things. So one is that to you, that process, you said a lot of this is really basic. To you, you're coming from the SaaS space.
Right.
And so Salesforce architected this SDR to AE process that has become the de facto standard for selling in SaaS.
Yes.
But in the rest of the world, it's not used.
Right. That's true. People have a full desk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And meaning that they go from prospecting to close.
Exactly. They run a full desk cycle.
Yeah. And I think that there are ups and downs, but that's actually part of the curiosity for me. So you mentioned, I like pulling this apart and trying to get the parallels for people that don't have 2,000 employees.
Yeah.
Right. Because there are lots of 8-9 figure companies that have 50 employees, 100 employees, 20 employees. Right. And so they don't think about it in the same way.
Right.
And when you're selling to them, you don't have to have 8 decision makers through the process and talk to fucking procurement. Right. So first, I want to talk about the person that is the account executive, because you mentioned, you were like, yeah, they have to have come from the industry and have at least 5 years experience. But then you got more specific and you're like, yeah, they also have to have sold a product over $100,000.
Yeah.
That is a software product.
Right.
And be heavily knowledgeable in IT.
Right. With a product competency.
With a product competency.
Yeah.
And the other that I think is baked into that statement, but wasn't explicitly said, was they need to be good at long cycle sales. And to me, what I'm looking for in a salesperson is that they've sold something similar. And to me, the metrics there are price point, sales cycle, and tangible versus intangible. And in your case, I would add technical expertise, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Well summarized.
So I want to talk about the SDR side of things, because the first question is, why not have those people target and go, you said full desk?
Full desk.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go from the prospecting stage all the way to the close.
Great question. So the expectation is actually that they do create their own pipeline still. So what you get in the industry today across enterprise SaaS, mid-market SaaS, and so on, is you get these like war leader, sports hero AEs that think of themselves so highly that they can never make another cold call again. And we try to qualify that out. We try to filter out of that in the interview process.
Don't you feel like those people have lost in the game of life in some capacity, because they're like done growing basically?
You know, it does feel that way, but
they're still killing it.
They're still killing it.
Yeah.
Because they came from really great companies that had crazy demand with really good marketing teams that would, and they had great products that were needed in the market.
Yeah.
So they were delivered leads and opportunities like butter. And yes, their quotas were higher, right? Let's say 50% above industry standard, but because their demand, they had a door of demand and they had to prioritize who they followed up with rather than the other way around, which is they had to prioritize who they go after.
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys are, at least for this, again, zero interest rate environment that we've been in for a long time, where companies are spending and innovation is fast and yada, yada. And we could talk about the pros and cons of that too, from a macro perspective, but they've just had an opportunity to W-2 at such a high rate without having to do outbound sales anymore themselves.
I get that. And I guess 2 things hit me on that. One is, that's why you have to be so fucking careful when you're hiring people, that you hire the right fit for where you are currently.
Totally.
So like for us, if I bring in a sales leader, their expectations, they are definitely filling their own pipeline. They're definitely making calls. And if I hire from the wrong pool, I end up with that guy or girl who's gangster, but only at things that are already teed up, because you lose the skill set to prospect. You lose the ability to handle the rejection of cold calling if you're not doing it.
It's a habit. And it's a muscle that needs to be trained.
100%.
Yeah.
The other is that just fundamentally as an entrepreneur, I think that as you stop, as soon as you get to a point of comfort with something, you run the risk of being complacent.
Yeah.
And I want the challenge of consistently being in that uncomfortable space to challenge myself to keep growing.
Of course.
And even though it feels good for a little while, inevitably I fall into this mode. If I'm there, I fall into this mode of feeling mediocre as fuck. And I'm like, shit. And that is actually what causes me to be like, I got to get uncomfortable.
Got to get back out there.
Got to get back out there. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So we try to qualify those out.
Oh yeah. We try to qualify out for it. We try to set expectations because what we don't want is to take a rock star that expects not to have to do the outbound activities and they show up and they're like, hey, here's the outbound expectation. Here's the pipeline expectation. So we try to set expectations very early on in the interview cycle, show cases of how it's worked. As a part of their interview trajectory, they interview with smart AEs on our side that are like, yeah, hey, I closed this many deals that were company led last year and this many deals that I led. And had I not, had pipeline contribution from myself, I wouldn't have hit my number. I did 120% of my number. That means 20% of the revenue was in accelerator territory. I had a higher commission value. But that 20% would have never happened if I just sat back and let the company give me the leads I needed to close. And yes, we, the business, will give you as many opportunities. We want to make you rich. We want to make you as rich as possible, right? Because for every dollar of revenue you bring in, we probably get 10 to 20x of street value from an enterprise value perspective, right? From a market cap perspective. But you got to contribute yourself as well.
Let me break that part down. Yeah. So when you say street value, do you mean the increased value of your company?
Of the company, yeah.
Got it. So you're looking at the value of exit.
Yeah, $100,000 subscription deal to us is worth $100,000 in billing and receipts, which is awesome. But it's worth about $1 million plus in street value in terms of enterprise value.
Got it. Meaning that you're going to sell at 10x top line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. SaaS multiples are crazy.
And they've changed so much, right?
Yeah.
If we were having this conversation a year and a half ago, it was 50x in the private markets.
That's insanity.
50x.
Well, write it out. We got time.
Yeah.
It depends. I don't know. When are you trying to sell?
We want to IPO the business. We want to go public.
Got it.
We think we have a platform play that will get us there.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we're all over the place, which I like.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so defocused.
No, it's great.
Over caffeinated and fasting.
That's it.
See, my blood is made of caffeine right now.
It's the nature of it. We have one person in the office who, this dude drinks like 11 cups of coffee a day. I don't even know how he does it. Like I have one or two and I'm lit. I'm moving.
I need to dial my shit back. It's so bad. I get these like the Whole Foods. I forget the brand even. I would just fill the fridge with them. People that come over to my place are like, bro, your fridge is literally just steaks and coffee. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I live. Coffee all day, steaks all night. Like that's what I do. But it's bad. I'll pour a cup right when I wake up, and then your cortisol spikes, and you got the caffeine high, and then I'm just chasing that dragon from 8 a.m. onwards.
I'm well aware of this.
Yeah.
I used to be a 1 cup, and then like maybe I'd have like a Diet Coke in the afternoon, which is a tiny bit of caffeine.
Yeah.
And now I've moved to like coffee when I wake up. And then I'm grabbing it again by 9:30, 10:30.
Yeah, it's such a dragon.
It is, man. Yeah. It is, because especially I think I think most entrepreneurs can relate to this, but sales is one in particular where like you need to be on.
You want to show up to that meeting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you have a big meeting at 8:30 or 9 a.m., like you don't want to be like, oh, well, I'm easing my way into the day. Like, fuck no. That's the most important fucking hour of the day, right? You have to be there.
Let's go do some yoga.
Yeah, exactly. No, fuck that. I have a buddy and I love him to death, but he's like, oh, well, I'm already getting the cortisol spike. So I just have 2 or 3 sips of matcha latte, or like a matcha tea in the morning. Just put me in that happy place. And I'll actually have my first cup of coffee at 11. And I'm like, I don't have time for that, bro. I barely make it anywhere on time. I wake up, I pour coffee into my face, think about water later, show up to a meeting, try to fucking crush it. Like, yeah.
I get it. I spent a year with no caffeine, no alcohol, no meat, no dairy.
Oh my God.
I know. I was,
that must have sucked.
It did suck. I was 34 and it also was beautiful. Like you could taste everything in a different way.
Yeah.
Every little thing you put in your body, you could feel. Right. There's like this deadening effect of dumping caffeine and alcohol and sugar and all this shit.
Your taste buds are just closed.
Everything. It's just, everything's just shut down. Everything's dying.
I find it's especially bad with like the processed foods.
Yeah, definitely.
Like have 2 Skittles and then take a bite of something natural and you're just like, this tastes like nothing.
Totally.
It's like, it doesn't taste like nothing. You just like overstimulated your taste buds.
Yeah. And that was part of it, is like, organic, farm to table, local, like meat. Actually, I wasn't doing meat. So it was all just veggies, and all the veggies were fucking delicious. And so I appreciated that period, but I find myself more and more in the camp that you just said, which is like somebody talks about their fucking matcha latte and I'm like, that's adorable.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to go get some shit done.
Yeah.
You have your matcha sips.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I love the days when I get, my morning routine checklist done, whatever that might be, that current instantiation of season or month or whatever. But the days when I get up and I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this in the next 5 minutes. And I had like hot dog to my chair for a call or hot dog, into my car for a meeting.
Yeah.
That's great too.
Yeah, totally.
Doesn't matter.
To me, those are inspiring.
Yeah.
And to me, those are the moments when my back is against the wall. I have to perform and I'm doing what I have to snap to grid and get shit done.
Totally.
And there's something about that for me that is like the essence of life.
Yeah, that's you're tapped into the source. I really feel like, not to take another tangent, but
I love it.
I feel like at current, there's so much information out there, especially through this medium of podcasting. And there's so many really smart, really interesting people that are out there putting the optimizations out. But now we're all caught up in these optimizations and forgetting what to do. Like I have so many people that call me and are like, so if I'm going to lift, should I ice bath first? Because I've heard that gives you a 20% increase in testosterone. I'm like, dude, who gives a fuck?
Right.
You're not even going to the gym. Just wake up, lift some weights, eat some eggs. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People are thinking about recovery as if it's a supplement. When really recovery is just about like sleep and maybe stretching a little bit and eat the right foods and have enough water.
Yeah.
It's so basic, but people are getting caught up in the supplement perspective of the optimization.
Yeah. Well, and that's the biohacker optimization side of things. Yeah. But for all of that, there's the business optimization, the marketing optimization, the sales optimization. There's everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
And I think the point is that it's execution over perfection.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's always going to be
perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's always going to be the case.
Yeah.
I had a note on my wall in my old house. It's like 10 years ago. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was 15 years ago. And it said, to have a standard of perfection is to have no standards at all. And I refer to myself as a recovering perfectionist because I used to need to make everything perfect.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it would allow me to get one thing done very, 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 very well and very, 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 very slowly.
Right.
And I've taken to this mass action to get V1 done and say, that's good enough. Let me move to V2.
Right.
Well, while we're talking about that, in terms of product, how do you know when to stop and when to ship the product as it is and to cut that off?
I think there's a saying about if you're not happy, if you're happy with your first release, you waited too long to release it, more or less.
I think it's a Reid Hoffman.
Yeah, Reid Hoffman. Right? Yeah. But later and later, as you actually go into more of a mature motion, it's got to be good. So we used to try to release monthly. Now we release quarterly. And we do integrations and bug fixes in micro releases, as like quick agile releases. But now we only release 4 times a year. But they're big releases. Customers are like, wow, like this is fundamentally not different. Like I have to change my workflow, but this is really impressive.
Yeah, because that shit's irritating as hell. Google's always like moving buttons and changing menu items. And I'm like, motherfucker.
Because they still have the consumer mindset. They're like A/B testing everything.
Total.
Yeah. Which is super cool. But in the enterprise, you have to be a little more like deliberate and close to perfect with your releases.
Well, this just illustrates why we need to use your product because it fucks up all my SOPs. We've got a checklist of like, this is where you go to do things. Then Google changes the whole fucking menu structure.
Right.
Like, or whatever company.
Right.
Okay. So where were we? We were talking about sales.
I have a funny sales story that I thought of when you were talking about perfectionism, actually.
Oh, tell me.
Well, when we were probably $200K in subscription revenue, and they were all on the backs of like
annual.
An annual subscription.
Okay.
This is like early days.
Yep.
And we had like, my uncle knows a guy that he can introduce us to. And my friend's friend is an IT director at this company. We were like purely referral and friends and family. Right.
Yep.
And we sat down with someone who became a total mentor and advisor to the business. This guy, Kaveh Rostempor, who worked at this company called Meltwater. He was an executive, one of the founding team, and the company eventually was sold for over $1 billion. Like they did really well.
Sick.
He's now running a customer success SaaS platform that's also killing it. Plan had. But we were in a room with him and we were trying to be so scientific. We were like, okay, if we attribute this much marketing budget to events and then we do a webinar and we cast a wide net and then we call those people and then we go to this thing and co-sponsor with, and he's like, Ramin, stop. Do you know what your customer looks like? And I'm like, yeah, I think it's like a, director of IT at a 500 person company back then. And he's like, okay, cool. Make a list of them by Monday morning. On Monday, come to my office, pick up the fucking phone and don't stop or get food or get coffee or get water or take a piss until you've connected with 10 of them and booked a meeting with at least one of them. And I'm like, oh, so this doesn't have to be perfect. He's like, no, don't even write it down. Just make a list and keep fucking calling it. I'm like, how many should be on the list? He's like, 30 to 40 companies, about 100 people. And you don't leave the room until you've booked meetings.
Love that.
Yeah. And then my co-founder and I, Arthur, who you met, literally sat in a room and started doing that as like a weekly practice, a daily practice. And it got to the point where we were in a office smaller than this with the three of us. It was like 3 25-year-olds, a little stinky and gross. And we printed out pictures of the companies we wanted to target, like Dropbox, Twilio, like all the companies that we wanted to get as customers. And we literally printed them out on pieces of paper, put them on one side of the wall. And then every time we'd get an opportunity created, we'd move that to the middle wall. And every time we'd close a deal, we'd move it to the customer wall. And eventually we ran out of space on the customer wall, raised money, and had to go get an office.
Amazing.
Which was awesome.
Amazing.
That's a pre-1 million story, though. I know you like the beyond 1 million stories.
I do, but the thing is, those are the stories that you need to fucking remember when you're at 8 figures or 9 or whatever, because people get trapped in. I just talked to somebody that rebuilt their website, spent $500,000 rebuilding their website. Right. And I was like, and this wasn't like an e-com site with thousands of SKUs or something. Yeah. It's $500,000. I was like, bro, and it took them 9 months. Yeah. And as somebody that just redid our website, I understand the pain of doing this. Yeah. But over planning, the question is, how can you get to MVP and accomplish the goal that you need to as quickly as possible? Right. And I think the other really good takeaway for that is the massive action that's uninterrupted and tracked, right? And any salesperson knows, any good salesperson knows that you have to track your input, right? You have to track the fucking number of calls you make, the number of appointments you get to. The whole thing has to be tracked. Otherwise, you trick yourself. You're like, yeah.
Oh, there's so many biases.
I put all this energy into it and where'd I go? And then you look down and you're like, shit, I made 7 calls. Yeah. And I spent a bunch of time researching. Yeah. And that was it. Yeah. So cranking out that action is important. I think it's really important in new ventures. And it's also important as you start to grow. Like one of the challenges I have right now is I still do large deals in our company, and because I like selling.
Of course.
But if I don't have concrete numbers around the numbers of calls I'm going to make, I have like a block 3 times a week. And I'm like, all right, hour and a half, 3 times a week that I'm spending touching people. If I'm not tracking the number of calls, man, it's real easy for 3 weeks to slip and realize I talked to 11 people. Yeah. Right. Or contacted or reached out to 11.
Right. Which is not significant enough to move the needle.
No, it's completely insignificant. Yeah. It's got to be that, hey, every day I'm going to have X number of calls. In fact, I've got a buddy in the mortgage industry who his entire career, he's had a rule that was at least 50 touches to prospective clients every week. And as he ran the company and built a sales team and did everything else, that number always stayed true.
That's amazing.
And that number being there meant that he had to have a schedule a certain way. And the meetings changed. They changed from like going and meeting somebody in an office to like coffee and drinks and dinners and whatever. The caliber changed too.
Of course.
But it was the staple that always kept things going. And it's like in a predictable selling system, that is keeping the pipeline full all the time. Yeah. Right. I love that. No. So, all right. So how does it change now? So if that's the before 1 million story, what's the war room like now?
Yeah. Now it's totally dialed. I mean, it's a virtual war room because we're a 100% remote company.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. Which we're dancing around with bringing people back, especially from a sales capacity, because there's just so much good energy when you're in a room selling together.
Totally agree.
Fun. I miss it. But today we're all virtual, but it works really well. The SDRs, they get together daily. Virtually, they joint call. There's so much technology out there now. So there's products like Nooks, Orem, where you can power dial, you can dial in mutual rooms together. So you kind of get this like half virtual, half in-person feeling. They're doing a lot of market response. So we kick off a lot of demand and they're basically picking up the phone, not order taking, picking up the phone and qualifying and moving into pipeline. And then that's about half their time. And the other 50% is all on outbound motions. The sales team themselves, I mean, they're super dialed. We're closing about 33 to 34% of every demo that hits us. So that's above, I think the industry average is like 26. So we're a healthy amount above that. And yeah, I mean, every single part of the sales process is now documented and follows a stage gate approach and so on.
Well, I want to talk about demand then. So I want to walk through this a little bit because almost nobody is really dialed.
Yeah.
I mean, there are obviously people that are, but I think a lot of people are consistently struggling to figure it out. So demand means that you're doing marketing to drive opt-in somewhere.
Yep.
Right. And those are the people that are, I want to talk about both kind of what that looks like and what mechanism you're using, but also what the calling or outbound approach looks like when they don't have inbound demand coming in. Right. So the demand is ebooks, webinars, demos. What does that look like for you?
Webinars,
all the above,
events, tons of content syndication partners. There's tons of companies out there like Demand Science, Tech Target. You can basically write 4 joint pieces of content with a really smart person in the industry or a partner like another company, put them out there as free literature with just a form, like a lead form that gates it. That's an easy way to get like really, really, really basic MQLs, like marketing qualified leads.
And those are third-party companies that push it out for you?
Yeah, they push it out.
So they're getting the traffic for you?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. They'll basically, they have a lead commit per month. If it's under a lead commit, we'll optimize. If it's over a lead commit, we'll generally say, hey, it's above the lead commit, but the lead score per account is lower than the threshold we want. So let's slow it down and optimize it and so on.
You got to break that down a little bit, man.
Yeah.
The lead commit is
let's say the lead commit is
what is a lead commit?
It's per week. We'll send you 75 raw leads that have engaged in some form or factor with your content on our syndication network.
Got it.
And we go, great. Now, if we take those 75 and throw them at 4 SDRs,
we have to convert a certain amount.
Yeah. And they have to look a certain way. They have to be the right leads, obviously.
Yeah.
One of the problems that we faced just a quarter ago, last quarter, was we noticed that our outbound productivity was down a lot. And it was because these content syndication partners were doing a great job of shipping us leads, but the lead quality wasn't so high. But the amount of follow-up it took to get Brad from that lead list to actually show up to a meeting was about the same amount of touches as an outbound motion. So I still had to email you and ping you and get you to accept a calendar invite and then take a call with me and then qualify it. And
paying for the lead twice.
Yes, exactly. There's just so much work that goes into this.
Through employee time and through the syndication network.
Exactly. So there's the opportunity cost on the outbound side and, we're paying the content send. So really what we did is we took our lead scoring model, which before was a little more open-ended because we were like, yeah, demand, we'll take it, right?
Yeah.
And basically said it has to look like this. Their score's higher if they've engaged with more than one piece of content. If it's a VP or director, here's the score. If it's a manager or analyst, here's the score. So we just updated our lead modeling.
And what are the elements of the score for you?
Size of company, industry, employee growth rate, and title of the person. Are they an adjacent influencer or are they a core decision maker? Stuff like that.
And those all actually roll into a functional lead score for you?
Yeah.
Got it. Awesome.
Yeah. And then based on that, we can prioritize our SDR's day because we want our SDR to have as much open calendar as possible so that they can do the outbound activities that generally are the type of pipeline that we want more than anything else. But we want them to do a lot of market response as well. We don't want you to have come to our website, raise your hand and say, hi, I'm Brad and I want Oomnitza, and for us not to respond to you for 3 days, obviously. We want to be right on top of that, right?
Yeah.
So we want our market response to be really strong, really high, really crafted, but we don't want to bog down our SDR's day. So we're always trying to optimize. So if someone is below, for example, a certain lead score, we'll put them back through a marketing nurture campaign.
Yeah.
Where we'll say, hey, thanks for engaging with our piece of content. We're doing a group webinar demo next Thursday, March 2nd. Sign up if you want to be there. And if they engage with that, if they register and they're a director, maybe the company's a little small or some reason they didn't pass the threshold, maybe now that's the action that actually puts them to the SDR desk because now they've taken two points of action or engagement rather than just one.
And that's bumping the lead score.
Got
it.
Yeah.
I love that. And how are you tracking this?
Various tools, Marketo, Salesforce. Obviously, we have Ringlead. I'm going to butcher our whole tech stack, but we have a whole marketing and sales tech stack that just spits this stuff out.
Yeah. Well, okay. So Salesforce is the core.
Salesforce is the core.
And Marketo is the
core for marketing. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. But we have like ZoomInfo. That is the data provider, the sales OS, as they like to say, even though anyway, I'll bash them later.
Yeah. I feel great about bashing them right now.
Okay, great.
I just think it's so hard to get clean, accurate data today.
Yeah.
Look, I very openly, deliberately put bullshit data out in the world. So when I fill out a form, you can count on most of it being garbage.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm deliberately masking the data so that when it comes back to me, I'm like, oh, you just bought the data somewhere.
Right.
Meaning that if somebody solicits me and they're like, oh yeah, I see that your company has 7,000 employees. And I'm like, yep, not talking to you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Or I just put fake email addresses.
Well, I do too, but sometimes you need the feedback.
The work.
Yeah. Sometimes they're going to email you something.
Right.
So, but I play with my birthday. I play with sales volume. Yeah. I play with head count.
Right.
All that stuff.
Right.
It just helps screen.
Totally.
The other trick for email address is you can do, and you probably know this, but your email plus at yourdomain.com.
Oh yeah.
So I can do my email plus, Salesforce SF at mydomain.com.
Right.
And then it'll still get to me, but I can see that somebody used that email address to solicit. And I'm like, well, that was a throwaway email for me.
Right.
So I can also filter everything with the plus SF.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Inbox optimization. Man.
Totally. Get rid of the garbage. Sorry, derailment. So I love the syndication platforms. That's cool. We're not doing that. I'll have to look at what's available there in our world. From an outbound perspective, are you doing what you did originally? Is it, hey, each SDR go make a list of the targets that are 2,000 employees or more, find the, track down the CIO or other decision makers? Is that the process in general?
So this is where the AEs and the SDRs can partner really well. The AEs generally will own a territory, let's say Southern California. And the AE will say, hey, AE, here's what we're looking for. We're looking for a list of 100 named accounts, target accounts in that territory. And the general ratio we want is we want 20% to be true Fortune 500. So like really, really big companies. And we want 80% to be within the defined ICP of 2,000 to 15,000. And they'll go and make that list. And there are way more parameters, right? Growth companies in tech versus media versus whatever. We try to really dissect to that level. And they'll take a list. It'll go through an approval cycle or two. They'll partner with their SDRs. And then the SDRs will look at that named account list and then use a tool like ZoomInfo, LinkedIn, and others to build lookalike lists. So
interesting.
Here's the core 100, but we have a lookalike list of 300 or 400 or 500 more within your territory.
Love it. Okay, so hold on. You said they'll go through a couple cycles of approval.
Yeah.
And you also said we drill into more parameters. Do you drill into more so that the AEs have a tighter expertise on that industry, or why do you drill into further parameters other than just?
It could be because the company has a notion as to what will work, like a hypothesis, or hey, look, I'm looking at your list and you have a bunch of manufacturing companies in Southern California. Really, where are the big entertainment houses? Where are the big studios? Like this makes tons of sense for them. They have tech floating all over the place, unmanaged and appreciating. And blah, blah,
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So we'll do kind of back and forth. We'll basically do sales management. We'll review with the territory leader and say, hey, let's look at your list again. Don't you think it makes sense to put some of this, take some of that out? Or we'll have new salespeople come in and go, hey, this product's awesome. We did a deal with, large Fortune 100 company last quarter. I think that should be our motion. My whole 100 account list is literally every large company in my patch, rather than all of the larger middle enterprise companies, the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 person companies that I should have a portfolio strategy with and hedge my outreach.
And that's all sales management.
That's all, collaboration between sales management, marketing, and the AE in the field.
Got it. So that let's say you hire an AE, they're taking handoffs from the SDR that are teeing them up, but they're also for some period of time building their initial list that they want to go after.
Yep. Yeah. And they're expected again to create like a third of their own pipeline. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the year, if you look at a rep and they're under 100%, if a third of the pipeline didn't come from personal contribution, then we go, well, that's the reason, man. You've got to contribute a third of this, because the SDRs are good, but they're not as sophisticated as our A's. So the A's should have, just like you said, 3 to 5 days a week of at least 2-hour blocks on their calendars where they're doing prospecting activities.
Yeah.
It's the only way to write your own destiny.
Yeah. I have so many questions about this. How long does it take to curate the list with management, with the rest of the sales team? Do you hit it head on? Does the A sometimes produce the list and you're just like, shit, get after it?
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes.
So that does happen, especially with an experienced AE who's really just taking last year's list, making some updates, subbing some out, putting some in, and then running with it. So sometimes it'll happen really fast. Other times there'll be tons of contention.
Yeah.
Marketing wants you to use these 20 accounts. These accounts suck. I don't want them, or they've already been stepped on, blah, blah, blah. So there's always a little bit of back and forth.
Got it.
Right now, again, February is almost over. We have our fiscal is the calendar +1. So our year started in February 1st. So we're 1 month in, and we're going to have finalized named accounts this Friday is the target.
Got it.
So it took us a month to do it for this year. But some reps have had it done since week 1. Other reps are still crying over, why didn't I get whatever account? Why did that go to Mark?
Wow. Yeah. Those are the struggles of a larger sales team at enterprise also.
Yeah.
Right? Because enterprise, you're restricted in the number of aggregate accounts that exist.
Totally.
Right? And how many sales reps are there? How many A's?
8.
8 A's. And they're regionally specific, right?
Yeah.
US only?
Today, US only. So basically, if a cat, but we have in any English speaking country, we have tons of customers. So if something kicks up in Australia or the UK, for example, it just goes to a round robin.
Interesting.
Which causes tons of tension.
I'm sure.
Because people get so lucky in the round robins, dude. Like I've seen deals close in round robin where I'm like, okay, so he did nothing and just made a freaking 100K commission check. That was insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. The international market is, I would imagine, nuanced from a sales perspective when you're messaging. So we talked about kind of the shift in, I want to get to incentives at some point, but we talked about the shift in messaging from the accelerated economic period to the recession.
Yep.
Right. And we kind of alluded to that in the beginning.
Growth versus efficiency.
Yeah. And I love that. And then the idea of the international market and having like extra levers that you might push on, or like, what are the differences? Let's talk about the pitch. So you talk challenger method. And the notion of that is challenging the frame that the business is currently in. Hey, you have problems.
Yep.
Nope. Let me highlight how big of a problem it is.
Yep.
And get them to feel the pain associated.
Yep.
Get them to understand that you are an expert in the space.
Correct.
Right. And that's the foundation through which you sell.
Yes.
Right. Why that mechanism versus others? Have you run other sales programs or other approaches, or is that always the approach you've taken?
We've tried other stuff, but it's not a commodity solution. And I think with any new technology that you're trying to take into the market and sell into the enterprise especially, you have to justify the need for change. So it can't just be like, my widgets are better than those widgets. Let's negotiate on price. You have to come in and say, hey, you have this problem. It's 3 parts problem, 2 parts solution, 1 part me. It's super consultative. And you have to give them a reason to want to make that change. And for them to lead into your product competency, put that solution in. For most new technology companies, that challenger methodology with the consultative solution sell makes the most sense, I think.
I think it probably makes sense to a lot of other use cases as well. You said a couple things that struck me, but the big trigger there was if people are comfortable with the thing they're doing and it's not broken. Right. So if they're in a place with software or a service or any product and it's not broken,
why switch? Right.
Why spend the time, energy, money to switch?
Yeah.
And you have to create the pain.
Yep.
To get them to even consider it.
They might have just felt some pain, and then you poke on that, or you spread a little fear around what the pain could be in the future.
Yeah.
That's why security, for example, is such an easy thing to sell. Because there's like so much FUD, right? So much fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You're like, okay, you guys haven't had a breach, but what if you do?
Right.
Or you're not in compliance with this process. Even if you don't have a security issue, you just, based on standards, have to be compliant to this standard. And if you're not, it's a $4 million, $5 million, $6 million fine.
Yeah. I love that you just said that's why it's such an easy thing to sell, because I think a lot of people would find that and like insurance to be a very difficult thing to sell.
Right.
But if you can effectively sell fear, yeah, that's
it's not the most fun, but it's, there's a reason it's like security is just such a big space, especially these days.
Yeah. I love that. So challenger method, that's why you do it. That's the approach. And through the growth cycle, you were talking about, I heard kind of features and benefits. Efficiency is what you said. No, efficiency is now.
Efficient. Well, you're always talking about efficiency, but during the growth cycle, it was about put the train tracks ahead of the train. You guys are seeing all of this scale. You're onboarding all these users, and you need to make sure that you have a secure environment, because we have this whole like security play across the board, and you need to kind of automate these processes, because the amount of technology objects you're bringing into your enterprise versus the amount of IT resources that you have to service all of this stuff, to manage all this stuff, that ratio is never going to work. It's the best it's ever going to be today, and it's only getting worse for you. So like, you got to do it today. You got to do it now.
Yeah. Technology objects, meaning applications, software, et cetera.
Yeah. Sorry. I speak in such, yeah.
No, I love it.
Different technology items like a laptop, mobile device, or soft assets like cloud and virtual environments, SaaS seats. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things about being, I'm sure you run into this quite often as well. Like, one of my favorite things about being in payments with EasyPay Direct is we are looking at everybody else's business models, and we're assessing the business model. And for us, we're assessing risk and looking at financials, looking at the numbers.
Right.
But part of it is that inevitably there is a lexicon that's unique to them, right? This unique language that means nothing to anybody else,
right?
But you have to get it. Like, you have to grab it and understand it, to be able to communicate effectively.
Totally. It's like every industry has its own Webster's dictionary or whatever of acronyms.
Totally.
It's how you create defensibility in the industry too. I feel like as a middle manager person, like, I don't care about this, right? But like, I know that we have, the longstanding grizzled veterans, and they just like speak in acronyms, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I understand you.
Yeah.
And I feel like I just did that. So sorry.
No, it's great. It's actually one of the things that I think is important through the lens of the podcast, is to get some access to that and to break it down, and to be able to understand it. Because like, I had this guy, Scott Ryan, on, who's local, has a family office. And so he's always raising money, and they raise money and they help $2 to $10 million companies grow. And they've got a pretty good mechanism to do that.
Cool.
But these motherfuckers that run family offices and PE guys and those acronyms, like, they're flying around, and the numbers fly around too.
Yeah.
And when you're dialed into the space, you can absorb that pretty quickly.
It's so fast.
But if you're not, it's like you're lost from the starting line, right?
The whole thing is meant to be a shortcut.
Yes.
Right. So instead of having a paragraph of language, you have 3 letters, and you're like, cool, connected, paragraph of language done, moving on.
Right.
But if you're just an outsider or an actual outsider, you're like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? Like, am I supposed to know this?
Right. So I'm allowed to be stupid in this environment. Just be like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or I was training a new person today, and we were talking about APIs.
Right.
And conceptually explaining what an API is to somebody that's not technical at all. I was explaining what an application was, right?
Right.
But the word application
is also
masked, right? It's like, and so I was like, okay, so any software is an application. Like, think about it that way, right? Yeah. Anyway, I was trying to break it down, but like, the word object you use as this catch-all for those things, right? And it isn't just full circle. When you say object, it isn't just applications, because you also had hardware objects in the picture, right?
Yeah.
So when you started, to zoom all the way out, it's optimizing workflows across software applications, and in some cases hardware applications, to make the process more efficient. When it previously used a human, they used a human to connect all those systems, right?
Exactly.
And those are the objects.
Dude, what? You got that in 30 minutes? Can you come speak to our sales team? I'm just kidding. They're great.
I love it. I love it, man. I love it. Well, I know that you've got a hard stop here, and I do too. But before we close, I want to talk just briefly about incentives and how you think about setting quotas and like ratios. Because I think that some of this is driven by the market, right?
Of course.
A salary, right, that you have to pay or whatever, and like a given incentive base. But how do you create those structures? How do you think about the AE or the SDR? And I guess you could do both real quick and just say, like, here is the salary, and here's the percentage over it, and here's how we think about setting quotas, and here's the accelerator.
Yeah.
What do you do for that?
So just at a higher level, I think the compensation plan is probably the best tool you have in sales leadership to get to the outcomes that you want. So I think it's super important. I think people overlook the comp plan and are like, yeah, just pay them and like you'll get what you need, or give them enablement and you'll get what you need. When really, like, really, really great AEs are coin operated, as they should be. And they look and they dissect their comp plan and they figure out all the little loopholes and games they can play to make the most amount of money possible. And you want that. So as an example, if you want companies to stay with you for a long time because your LTV ratio, your lifetime value ratio matters a lot, then maybe you pay 10% of the deal if it's a 1-year deal, but you have an accelerator where it's like 15% of the deal if you sign them up for 2 years and 17% of the deal if you sign them up for 3 years. All of a sudden, Jimmy out in Tennessee is going to make sure all of the customers he brings on board see a 3-year quote first, and then use that as a negotiating chip to say, oh, you can only do a 1-year deal? Sure, but then we can't have this or that discount, right? And so you get the behavior that you're looking for based on the comp plan. So I think the comp plan exercise and the rules around the comp plan really dictate a lot of the side benefits that you might be looking for outside of just let's go hit that big number.
So you want to carve out 3 hours to go over comp plans right now? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, please. Let's do it.
I really do. But okay, so I love that. And that was a fundamental shift for me in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Because for me as a driven person,
you're just trying to win.
I'm just trying to fucking win.
Yeah. But you own the business and you're looking at other numbers like EBITDA, where a rep is just like, yo, how many deals do I have capacity for?
Right.
And what are the right types of deals, or what right type of contract structure, paper structure I should have to make sure I can make the most out of this existing comp plan?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. So, do you have a ratio, or like, give an example of salary to expected OTE?
Yeah, totally. So, we get reps on a $240K OTE plan, and, I'm not sure how this is going to change in the market, and, some people will deserve more, some people deserve less, depending on their level of experience, but it's generally 120K base and then 120K in variable plan.
Mm-hmm.
The quota is set at around $1 million. So you have $1 million. Our average deal size is 100K, and our average sales cycle is about 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
110 days. And given all of that, for example, a couple years ago, this multi-year thing, we were like paying tons of accelerators for multi-year deals. We've pulled that back now. Why? Because in a multi-year example, companies are getting locked into a certain price and module structure, whereas we actually know our product's really good. So we just want customers to sign up for a year, because we know if they sign up for a year, as soon as they get passed to account management and customer success in the account management team is going to do such a good job of upselling them other workflows, other modules, other apps, that we don't want to be locked into that negotiated rate that AE did for us in year one. So now, multi-year deals, amazing, we don't incentivize them as heavily as we used to. So that, like, this year's comp plan, I hope our A's don't hear this before they see the comp plan, because we're also releasing that right now. But the multi-year deals don't have as much acceleration.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Generally, my view on things is if you're a very established company, you can nickel and dime and pay like a lower commission yield. Mm-hmm. If you're a growth company and you're like, hey, we're out there evangelizing a new product space, a new category, a new whatever, you should feel comfortable paying up to 35% of the total deal value as a waterfall to sales leadership, maybe the SC, maybe partially the SDR, and to the AE, where the AE, of course, should be getting the bulk of it, but probably 10 to 15% is the right number. And that's the zone we try to play in.
10 to 15% of gross revenue that came
of the first year ARR, the first year annually recurring revenue.
Got it.
So a rep might do a deal that's 120K in total contract value, where it's 100K subscription, 20K in services to do the implementation, because we have a whole professional services team that implements customers.
Sure.
That 20K doesn't touch the commission waterfall. The subscription does.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a whole nother challenge, is keeping your comp plan simple enough that
you don't have like so many asterisks.
Yeah. Communicated clearly, tracked clearly, et cetera.
Right.
I love that. Okay. So the quota basically what I heard was essentially 10 deals for a year.
Yep.
And the close cycle is 110 days, 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
And we could get, we could get into why that was the number, but let's not for the moment and just say, you've got the 10 deals in a year. What happens when they pass quota?
Acceleration.
And how, when you say acceleration, you're talking all of a sudden you get a multiple of your
commission value on the marginal dollars that you close.
Got it. So anything over quota.
Yes.
Then in how much acceleration? So let's say you get a 15% commission on your quota, which in this example, it was 120 grand for the year in salary.
Yeah.
And if you hit your quota, it's another 120 grand through that 15% commission you're getting.
Right.
So now you're at 240 for the year. But let's say you book another
$250K.
$250K.
Yeah, you want to pay that at like 20%, 22% even.
Okay, so then you go from 15% up to 20 to 22% for anything over that.
Yeah, so the best reps are pushing to get over 100% somewhere between Q3 and early Q4 so that all of Q4 is just spent in accelerators.
Love that.
Yeah.
And that's what you want as a company.
That's what we want as a company. We want to pay that on the marginal dollar because basically that's everything over plan. I mean, the right way to do the P&L on this is to say, here's my cohort of current reps. And we think the team in aggregate is going to do about 78% of quota achievement. So the average rep will really only close $780K out of $1 million quota. Mm-hmm. So anyone that's moving the needle up on that, that's already icing on the cake and over plan. We're happy to pay for that. We want to pay for that.
I love it, man. Well, I have 17 other questions that will spin into another 304 questions.
Sorry. I feel like I took us in a bunch of tangents.
No,
today.
it's fantastic.
My bad.
We'll dig in more socially or another time here, but
cool.
Appreciate you spending the time, man. If people want to find out about the company or you,
please go on Oomnitza.com if you can figure out how to spell it. Oomnitza. And my name is Ramin Ettehad. Find me on LinkedIn or add me on socials like Instagram or whatever.
Love it, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for carving out the time.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely.
Cheers.
Love it. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I need your help. There are 3 places you can find Beyond a Million. The podcast itself, beyondamillion.com, which has some cool free resources, including a free course. And we finally launched the Beyond a Million YouTube channel. I would love it if you would go there and subscribe. And if you don't want to, you still would probably enjoy seeing the visual content. Check it out, youtube.com/@Beyond a Million.